Hi, welcome to a God Vlog. I'm going to talk a little bit about baptism today. Baptism began with John the Baptist, who was baptizing as a way to protest Rome's occupation of Palestine and its abuse of power, its unjust class system, and its inhumane treatment of the majority of the population. John was calling Jews into the desert wilderness to reenact Joshua's crossing of the River Jordan, to symbolically take the promised land back. And on the way across, the people he was calling, he had them confess their sins and be immersed by John as a baptism of repentance, to be cleansed and then initiated into John's following in anticipation of the coming one. The temple was an institution that had been corrupted by Rome, and the temple elite worked for Rome in oppressing the Jewish peasantry. And John's offer and practice of forgiveness by baptism sort of sidestepped the temple and its rites and its expensive temple fees. And consequently, as John grew in popularity, he would probably have been perceived as a real threat to those whose authority was grounded in that temple. And his movement would have been understood as a protest against the temple and also against the Roman occupation of Palestine. As you've probably heard, if you've read the Bible or listened to it, especially on the Baptism of Christ Sunday, Jesus was baptized. That's why we have Baptism of Christ Sunday, and that's actually why Christians are baptized, because Jesus did it and instituted that. And Jesus was baptized by John, and that means he took part in these protests and in John's movement. That's what scholars believe that represents, and we hear it in all the Gospels that John baptized Jesus. And as I mentioned, in the first century Palestine, there was this drastic inequality between the haves and the have-nots, and the wealthy ruthlessly exploited the poor. And the ruthlessness caused peasants to resist, and resistance movements like John's arose. The Christian baptism ritual has as its roots John the Baptist's God-centered resistance movement. It was, and it still is, about resisting oppression and calling forth God's justice. That's what Christianity is about. It's about believing in love and loving. And so Christians have continued to publicly reenact and participate for 2,000 years in the sacrament of baptism, started by John out there in the River Jordan. And baptism it's not of our making, but of God's making. That's how Christians understand it. And it would serve us well to remember its radical nature. Like John and his followers, we are called to rebel against inequality and injustice and embrace love as a means to peace, to express through ritual not only our love of God in baptism, but our faith and our commitment to love of others. And so baptism is a radical act. It is a radical act, and so is Christian love. So we would do good to remember to be radical in love. That's what Jesus did. That's what John was doing out there, and it continues to be our call and our duty today. Thank you for joining me. My name is Reverend Scott Elliott. I'm the pastor at Riviera United Church of Christ in Palm Bay, Florida. Go in peace, knowing that you're loved and that you matter.